Welcome to Big Blend Radio's fourth Tuesday Tree Talk Show. And today we're excited to welcome back Shelley Whizin. She is the founder and CEO of the Soul Diving Institute, where she studies and teaches the art and science of being human. She's also the author of The Healing Journal, The Story of the Magical Baby Grand Piano, and her latest book is delicious. It's called What Do You Bring to the Table? A Savory, Sensory, and Inspirational Guide to Living a Yummy, Delicious Life. And in fact, the front cover, she's in the trees. She's, going out and picking fruit in the trees. And you can get the book, go to whatdoyoubringtothetables.com. What do you bring to the table book.com. And you can keep up with Shelley and her courses. She's doing some amazing projects. Go to ShelleyWhizin.com. That's WHIZIN. So welcome back, Miss Shelley. How are you doing?
Great. Thank you for asking.
Yeah.
I love this topic.
Well, yeah, your logo. So we have your logo. And as you know, Nancy and I keep seeing the tree of life everywhere we go. Like Shelley's everywhere we go. Like, what's going on? So, and on Facebook, you're always posting tree things. And, you love trees like we do. And I thought, well, she's got to come on a show because trees are really integrated into our life. And right now we're on a big push to get tree equity, not just in our country, but around the world. In other words, having the right amount of trees in our neighborhoods so that we have better health, the environment can be healed, and we'll all have a better life. We all want to sit under the shade of a tree with a good book and an apple.
Right.
But so tell us let's start with your logo. Why did you decide I want the tree of life?
Well, first of all, I was looking for a logo, and there was another tree that looked similar to this one. And there was something about the energy of that artwork that just went straight into my heart. And it was on Big Stock or something like that. I don't remember where I found it, but I went to research who the artist was. And because I wanted a particular look on my tree, and they said, no, this artist is Russian, lives in Russia, and I don't think we could ever get a hold of her. And somehow it was a miracle. We got a hold of her, and the tree that was in Big Stock, I couldn't have it because it was in a gallery somewhere in Russia.
Oh,
and
wow.
Artwork belonged to somebody else, so I couldn't have that artwork. And I asked her if she would make me a tree for me. And she said that she would, and I wanted it to be a certain shape. And then as I was looking through some of her other trees, I saw this one, and I went, oh my God, it brought tears to my eyes. There's something like she's dancing, like the trunk is dancing. You can even see a woman in the top doing
flexible.
This.
Yeah.
Just kind of her whole body is dancing. And I just fell in love with this tree. And so I bought it from her. So this is definitely my tree.
It's her tree and nobody else's but you wanted trees. So is there something about trees because of what you teach? I know you're doing these amazing programs on being conscious, teaching us the 3 B's to living a happy life. And so trees are part of nutrition. I know you talk about cooking, and cooking is a big deal too. And we don't have fruit without trees. Well, you can swap berries, but berries need the shade of the trees. So there's that whole connectiveness. And I think there's like a web of life that really does connect with it. But how does that connect with you for what you're doing in regards to teaching soul diving, being conscious?
Well, first of all, the tree, forever, the tree has been a symbol of the tree of life. Why? Because it roots into the earth. There's something that is magical about a tree. You get a tiny little acorn, and it grows into this magnificent oak tree. And so you see something from something small, and it grows into something big. And one seed can create a multitude of fruit on that tree. Just think of an apple tree. There's one seed in that apple. There are many seeds in an apple, but all it takes is one of those to create a whole tree. So seeds and plants and trees, they're stoic. They're solid. they do their job. One of the most fascinating things that I learned in this book called The Hidden Life of Trees, which is a fabulous book, and I would highly recommend it for everyone. It's written by Peter Wohlben, Wohlleben. And one of the things I learned in this book, which is fabulous, is the redwood trees, you know, up in Santa Cruz and everywhere. You'd think, because as children, we believe that as tall as trees go is how deep their roots go.
Yeah.
Right? But redwoods that could be 80, 100 feet, their roots are very short.
Yeah, they're
And
shallow.
instead of being shallow, I mean, instead of being deep, they're shallow, but they go out and they start to interconnect like this. So all the trees hold each other up.
It's cool.
With their root system. And if a tree over here is not in the sun or needs something, the trees can send it sugar through their root system. The trees can send nutrients to trees that aren't getting nutrients.
That's cool.
It's their communication system underneath the earth.
There is a theory that it's all one tree. Like like a plug that you would get from a nursery to grow a lawn. Sometimes it just keeps growing and growing and growing. You haven't planted plugs all over. You plant one and it sends an offshoot and it sprouts, and it sends an offshoot and it sprouts. There is a group of people, I don't know who's wrong or right, but there is a group of people who believe that the sequoias in particular are really all one huge tree, and it just keeps sending shoots out. Now, I don't know, you know.
No, we
I have
don't
no
start
idea.
sending us emails. We didn't do it.
Yeah, we're just saying it.
You know,
We're just
but
saying
it-
there's a theory.
and when you see
but
it, a sequoia uprooted,
Mhm.
what they just fall down. They just go, that's it.
Yeah.
And they do it
Because
in
they're
pairs,
shallow.
it seems like too.
They're shallow roots.
And
yeah.
I mean, but they're massive. I mean, the
Yeah.
base
And-
of them, but the roots are really shallow, and it's absolutely mind blowing.
But they also have like behind their bark, they have like a pocket of fluid and oxygen before you get to the bark. So when we look at what's happening in the sequoias now, a lot of those trees will survive.
The fires,
because of that pocket of oxygen and water between the bark and the inside the core of the tree.
That's very interesting. I learned something else too that fascinated me, and you may think this sounds kind of crazy, but I equate it to when somebody dies. And here's the analogy. There's a certain seed, it's called a jack pine tree. And the seed of a jack pine tree will only open when it's at 1400 degree temperature.
Yeah.
And that's why we get to see reforesting, because the temperatures get so hot that all the seeds that are lying dormant under the earth, they pop and they start to root.
They call it scarification. Like some seeds
That's a
have
big
to
word.
be, some seeds have to be scarred. Like I know people who would collect seeds in the forest and put them in a blender to not mash them all up, but just to scar them a bit to mimic nature's.
That's how
go
they
through the
reforested Yuma
process.
on the Colorado River, the lower
Right.
Colorado River. They had to reforest and take out all to put the cottonwoods back and the Palo Verdes and things. If you look at a Palo Verde, it's going to take years to even open that pod of seeds. So the
Right.
guy reforesting, they were really trying to work on this and make it as natural and as possible. And he's having a margarita on the river. He went, oh, and he put it. This is the story that's been passed down, so don't
Yeah,
blame me.
that's funny.
And so he's like, let's put them in the blender, and it worked apparently.
Yeah.
And now the cottonwoods are there. The beaver came back.
Yeah.
And so the water's getting clean. And so the beaver, yes, go for the cottonwoods, but they've created this natural ecosystem. I mean, you give nature a chance and she will propagate
She'll
and
come
do what
back.
she needs to come back. It's amazing to see.
But you have to give her a chance.
But the sequoias also, the fire plays a role in them also being able to hatch open their seeds and produce. So,
That's
wildfire.
true.
What scares me about the wildfires now is that the wildfires are growing faster and hotter than normal.
Hotter.
And
Yeah.
so I don't know if these seeds are actually going to open up or just be burned to ash because of
Hmm.
how the intensity of these fires are getting stronger and stronger with climate change. And everyone just, concerned about the sequoias, which has been really rough. Some firefighters have been, I mean,
Mm.
we're getting press releases like every few hours. It's an area dear to us. We cover it. We're there this year. There is a fund through the Sequoia Parks Conservancy. So if you go to sequoiaparksconservancy.org, you can help them. They're doing all the help with Sequoia and Kings Canyon National Parks for reforestation, to put signs back, to do all the maintenance. They really are an amazing program. But
Mm.
today, as we record this show, Sally Jewell did give the official thumbs up to help with funding back into the sequoias. But I mean, they're really, the firefighters, they've had 4 fallen, but
Mm.
not fallen, pass away, fallen, injured. And
Mm.
so it's just a really, really hard fire, but
We
they're
have
doing
one going
awesome.
on right now in Santa Barbara.
Yeah,
Mm.
there's always fires, and California's had a really
I know.
rough time, but this is something about the importance of having tree equity, and we learned this through American forests. If we have the right amount of trees, and yes, there is clearing, and this will create jobs where people do the right clearing and the right maintenance. We will have shade, and it actually will help even with our water table correctly if we have the right trees. So I
Especially,
think it's
not the invasive trees. We need
right,
the
and
natural trees that come from the
I wonder
specific
about us
area.
as individuals and what you teach through, being conscious and the 3 Bs, about us as individuals sometimes going, okay, we're going to grow a tree in our backyard or in the front yard or whatever it is, and taking the time out to actually care for a tree would bring us a little bit back closer to consciousness, because now we're caring for something that's going to give back to us, right? And
Mhm.
as a project
Mhm.
for even a youth to watch something grow, even from seed, to watch something grow is incredible. So would you say that goes with the whole thing that you work with in regards to consciousness?
Totally. When we
Mm.
become conscious, we really start to become conscious of almost everything. I mean, that's the goal, is to be conscious of every moment. Right here, I'm looking in the camera. I'm in my peripheral. I'm seeing both of you because I'm looking in the camera, because if you don't look in the camera, it doesn't look like you're looking. So,
Look at me, Shelley. Look at me.
look at me, look at me,
Look at me.
look at me. And I see my light, I see my bulletin board, I see, in my peripheral as I'm looking straight forward. When we are conscious of where we are, and I always say, look at where your feet are planted.
Mhm.
When you look at where your feet are planted, you actually become conscious of where you've taken yourself in life. And so this dawned on me when I was in the deserts of Morocco when I was 19 years old. And all of a sudden I realized, I looked down at my feet and I said, oh my God, I am in the desert of Morocco outside of Marrakesh. And all I could see were desert for miles and miles and
Mhm.
miles, with one green river running through it. I mean, the blades of
Mhm.
grass from the river, knowing that. But when you become conscious of everything as much as you possibly can, you really are present here in this moment. So you can appreciate the tree, you can appreciate the plants, you can appreciate your breathing.
Yeah, well, we need trees for breathing.
We need
That's for
trees for
sure.
breathing. We cannot breathe without our trees.
That's absolutely true.
And even for that reason, to plant a tree. So what's interesting too is when a seed starts to take root, when it actually opens up, and the reason I said before about equating it to the end of life is because, okay, so we are energy, right? All of us are full of energy, and you could even replace the word energy with spirit, because something's moving me, something's moving my hands. I'm being animated. I'm being
Watch
able
those
to
fingers, Shelley. I know from
watch
our
those
last
fingers.
conversation, you
That's
never
right.
know.
That's right. No finger pointyitis.
No, no.
Yeah, no finger pointyitis. And what happens is, at some point in time, our spirit and the universe expands. We know that. That's a scientific fact, that the universe is expanding, always expanding. also contracting, but it expands. When our spirit, and this is my theory, when our spirit expands so much so, it no longer needs the body breaks down like a seed, and the spirit can fly free
Oh, I like
without
that.
the body.
Hmm.
So whenever I think of that jack pine seed, I'm always reminded of the spirit, the great forceful spirit that we have within each of us that is so big that it wants to join the expanded universe where we come from, because we don't die. The spirit and energy doesn't die.
No,
The
energy
body
doesn't die.
may die. The body breaks down. It's no longer animated, but the spirit just changes form, because Einstein said you can't kill energy.
You
It
can't.
only changes form.
Mhm.
We change form and we become a formless form. And the seed breaks through so it can become a form that's locked inside that little
Mhm.
seed. The whole, it's like a hologram. Everything about that tree is in that tiny little seed.
It's amazing when you think about the tiny seed grows into these huge sequoias.
Yes.
Oh
It's
yeah,
actually
and
really
the
amazing.
sequoias have this tiny little
Mm.
pine cone. You get the
It's
sugar
so
pine, which is
tiny.
smaller, and the sugar pine is like huge.
It's a huge pine cone.
Yeah, but the
The
little one,
seeds are still very
Tiny.
small.
and
Yeah.
You
when the
would
tree
think it would be
dies,
a big seed. No, it's like that.
when a
Little
tree
tiny
dies, and we did this in the sequoias recently when with the Sequoia Parks Conservancy, Kate took us out and she was showing us like,
Mm.
here's the dead tree. And people think, oh, we got a dead tree, let's chop it up, use it for wood. Okay, that's part of energy, part of heating, but people think, oh, it's a dead tree, get it out. Well, when you move that, you're taking away, it's like, don't rake up your leaves. When you rake up your leaves, you're killing the mulch, the natural mulch for your yard. You're killing all these little critters living there that actually make the soil aerated, and little caterpillars and earthworms and all that cool stuff. You're
Right.
killing those, and you probably go, ew, I don't want them, but you do, because it's part
You
of air,
do.
it's part of keeping your
Yeah.
soil nice. And
Mhm.
so the dead tree provides life for all the bugs, and we look at them, we call them nature's gallery. So
Yeah.
when you see dead trees, go look at them. You'll find markings from where caterpillars have been and grubs have chewed through.
Mhm.
And right before hibernation, the bears come in, they start scratching up the trees so that they can eat the grubs, so they
Mhm.
can have their protein for while they're doing their deep sleep in winter. So
Yeah.
there's this whole cycle that goes on. So even a dead tree
Mhm.
is
It's
alive.
it's part of the system.
Yeah, it's so
Yeah.
cool. The web of life is so
Mhm.
crucial for us to all understand. It's like
Yeah.
it's the ripple effect, but it
Yeah.
really shows how each of us are connected to every single thing.
Everything. Yeah.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Right after
And-
I read this book, I remember right after I read this book. Well, here, let me just read just one little thing. A tree is not a forest. On its own, a tree cannot establish a consistent local climate. It is at the mercy of wind and weather, but together,
Mhm.
many trees create an ecosystem that moderates extremes of heat and cold, stores a great deal of water, and generates a great deal of humidity, just like you were talking about.
Mhm.
And in the protected environment, trees can live to be very old. So what I got out of this whole, and it's interesting, I read this book and then I was officiating a wedding. And this whole notion of keeping each other together, holding each other so that you are the support system. That's what I got from the trees, the sequoias, and all of those trees up
Yeah.
in Santa Cruz that are supporting each other. It's a community that is supporting each other, sending messages here, sending sugar there, sending nutrients here, and they're all holding each other up. And to me, if we did that in humanity, if we held each other up in that way and had high regard for each individual
Yeah.
as an individual, but cannot survive on our own, because we cannot. You hear self-made this, self-made that. Yes and no.
Mm-mm.
We
Exactly.
never, ever do anything in this life alone.
It's a
Never.
village,
Mhm.
Nancy. Nancy always talks
Yeah.
about the village.
It
You
is
need the village.
We
You
Mhm.
need
need
the
each
village.
other
We
to,
need to be the village people.
yay!
Yay.
For the tree people and the village people.
Yeah.
We have an organization here called the Tree People, and there's a beautiful piece of property with beautiful trees, and they take care of all the trees in the area. And that's the whole thing. It's when we contribute
Mm,
who we are and how we are
you feel better.
to each other. We want to uplift each other, not tear each other down like we do the trees. So insensitively, when they go to the rainforest and they want to get it for lumber or make,
Right.
cattle grazing property, whatever it is,
Mhm.
it's so disrespectful. The
Mhm.
Native
Yeah, it's-
Americans, they've got it right.
It's crazy when you think a new housing development comes in. So they tear everything down and make it all flat. And then they build the houses and then they bring in new trees
Right.
where they could have, with a little forethought,
Leave the trees.
leave the trees.
Build around.
Yeah, they're already there. Now the person who moves into the home doesn't have to wait 20 years for the tree to grow up
Yeah.
and give
Write
shade.
that down.
Leave the trees. It cannot be that hard
Yeah.
to bulldoze around.
Yeah.
It really can't be that hard.
Yeah.
Talking to engineers, I know one lady who's an environmental engineer, and she said the problem is that people yell after the effect and get all upset about things, especially when you
Mm.
have big developments going in. She goes, got to speak beforehand because the engineers and even the developers are fine. They just need to know how
What you want.
what you want. Otherwise, you're going to get the easy thing that's not
Yeah.
necessarily good for the environment. So it's
Yeah.
anytime you see anything happening, or if you're building your own house, then you start to learn, okay, how am I going to work together and coexist? I want to go
Mhm.
back to what you're saying with the wedding too, because about supporting and holding each other up. I think a lot of times people think, okay, well then you're all the same, and how do we want to have individuality, especially in this country. We're very about our individuality, right, and what sets us apart. And one lesson I learned from Khalil Gibran, it's in his book, The Prophet. He talks about the tree, and then in a relationship, the unity is the trunk,
Mhm.
right? So if it's a husband wife or wife and wife, husband and husband, your relationship together is the trunk. One arm is your 100% your individuality, the other arm is their individuality. Or maybe I got their trunks, maybe you're the big trunk,
Branches.
I don't know. But basically you unite on one trunk, but you can still have your own stem or trunk.
Absolutely.
Does that make sense?
Yeah,
I need to
it's
go
like
read
here's
it.
here's the branches over here. If you want to say husband and wife, here's a husband branches. There's a trunk where they're together. There's a wife
Mhm.
branches. So here's the wife's individuality. Here's the husband's, but together they are the trunk.
And an individual relationship.
And then if you want to carry it further, then maybe the roots are the kids.
Yeah.
But it's about, you still have that unity, but you can still have your
individuality.
individuality so
Right.
that we can celebrate
Mhm.
each other's differences too.
Well, if you see some of those images that I post that I
Oh,
love,
I love it.
trees, some of them are intertwined, they grow into each other. And so they
Mm.
look like one tree, but they're really two trees that have
Yeah.
grown together. And then
Mhm.
they have offspring in their branches. So the whole analogy of being able to hold each other up and support each other and contribute to each other's life. I mean, trees, all they do is contribute. They
Mhm.
take
Yeah.
from the earth's nurturing and they contribute oxygen to us. They clean up the environment. They're like servants.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Trees are the ultimate servants that ask nothing in return.
Yeah, you're right on that.
And they
Absolutely right.
stay and they stand for sometimes even thousands of years. Do you know how many generations of people they have seen?
Mhm.
Did you ever read the book, The Giving Tree?
No.
Oh,
No.
Mhm.
get the book. It's by Shel Silverstein.
Uh-huh.
The children's book, but most children's book are really for adults, just in children's language. But the
Nice
giving
one.
tree is about this beautiful tree that has offered shade and for this little boy for many years, and he always would go under and sit under this tree. And after a while, he wanted to build a house. So he cut down the tree,
Oh,
used the wood of the tree
no.
for his house. And then he went and there was no shade anymore.
Mm.
So he sat on the stump of the tree, and the tree still gave him the nurturing that as an old man, the old man gave to the tree, and there was no more shade. And he just sat on the stump of the tree, but the tree gave him a place to sit. So the tree
Amazing.
still served all the way to the end of its life.
That's wow.
And it's a beautiful story, just a beautiful story called The Giving Tree.
That's amazing when you think about them, giving and giving and giving. And, part of what we learned with American Forests, and everyone, you can do americanforest.org, go to treeequity.org, I think it is. But you can go and look up your zip code of your house. Like go look up on the set. It's done all
In
through
your
satellite
neighborhood.
imagery. You can look up your neighborhood and where you are. And what they saw is that places that are not wealthy do not have the trees. And
Oh,
so
yeah.
when people come in and say, oh, let's build a park, and we document parks and public lands,
Yeah.
then okay, we get this grant, we get this money, and the trees will go in and the park will go and it will be next to the affluent part of town versus the non-affluent part of town.
Yeah.
And so that's part of the problem. So you have this inequality happening with trees, and so those families health-wise start to suffer asthma, the children not having a place to go sit in the shade. So your quality of life, because getting to the point of trees produce quality of life, they give us air and health. But like what you're saying with this, cutting down the tree, they serve us, and we can work together, have happy trees, happy families. And that's something I think we need to look at for our youth. They need to have the joy. I mean, are we losing? I mean, we see all these buildings going up everywhere. Like, I mean, as we're traveling the country, we're seeing all kinds of stuff, but where are kids going to go and play? Remember, we used to have swings in the tree growing up. We'd have our friends over, have picnics under a tree. I mean, think about it. You would just go hang outside. Where are kids going now? And if you're in, an area where you're in apartments and it's all cement and, roads, what quality of life is that for a kid?
Yeah. And then we feel no grounding because
Right.
it's very important for our bare feet to touch the earth so that we pick up
This is true.
energy of the earth and not the concrete. I mean, it's interesting that we use, in cemeteries, it's not a law, but it's a thought of law that you have to bury in the cemeteries. You bury people in a concrete vault. You've been to a funeral, right?
Yeah.
And they lower the casket in a concrete vault that is under the earth. Why
I
do you
didn't know
think
it
they
was
do that?
I thought it was just dirt.
No.
Huh.
Why do you think they have a concrete vault underneath the earth in
Oh, wow.
cemeteries? Why?
So you don't go back to the earth.
So that everything stays even. Because if you buried a wooden casket in the
You'll
ground,
rot
the wood
eventually.
would decompose and it would start to sink. And so the cemeteries would look like this rather than like this. So they have concrete vaults that you put the wooden casket in.
I don't want to be in a concrete vault.
Me no, but so then
No.
burial. So you need
Yeah.
to find a place where you can be buried into the earth, and there aren't that many places like that.
There's
Or
a thing
there's
with
a place
trees.
in Santa Cruz where you can be buried next to a tree.
Yeah.
Your ashes can be put in a tree, or there's also these composting wombs that you can be put in and buried under the earth near a tree.
Yeah, I think this whole thing, cemeteries, is becoming an issue in regards to land. It's like, how, I mean, we're basically covering the earth with vaults. cement vaults.
Concrete vaults.
Yeah, and it's an old belief system, and it's religious and spiritual. So I'm sure we'll get emails like, "I'm not taking my daddy out." I
The
didn't say
concrete
so.
vault is actually it's a a policy. It's not a law, but it's a policy that they've adapted all these cemeteries so that everything looks even, and the grass doesn't have sinkholes. It doesn't look like this. So
Well,
it's
no matter what you do in
cosmetic
Louisiana,
reasons.
they float.
And the other thing is, then we never get to decompose in the earth.
That's weird. I know. Why are we preserving ourselves?
Yeah. Well, we don't preserve ourselves. We turn into some green goo, but
Oh,
that-
nice.
Well,
I mean, where can it go? It's in a concrete
if
vault.
you go to Egypt, you can get preserved.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
You can get embalmed and then you just streaks ahead because
Well, that's a very
green goo.
interesting thing because the embalming
Mhm.
leaks out of the
Yeah.
body and goes
It's
into
not
the
good.
earth, and it
Yeah. It's a
It's a
contaminates the earth.
chemical.
It is so
Now
Well,
bizarre.
that-
going to cemeteries, we do a lot of cemeteries, as we travel, because we
Oh, I
consider
love
them a park. It's a resting place.
Yeah, yeah.
And master gardeners, and actually cemeteries are in just as much trouble financially, these old historic cemeteries, as our parks are
Mm.
for maintenance,
Yes,
funding,
Mhm.
knowing who, keeping the graves maintained, the headstones. We have
yes.
people, Revolutionary War soldiers whose
Mhm.
you can barely read their
Can't even
names,
see their name. Yeah.
or
Yeah.
women. I mean, we've seen, and cemeteries are really, really fascinating when you
They
go
are.
through and you learn about people and you didn't even know
Mhm.
these people existed. Then you're like,
Yeah.
dude, what a cool life. Or,
Yeah.
man, that person did that, So
Yeah.
cemeteries are neat. And by the way, be careful because snakes hang out in cemeteries. And
They
I think
do.
that now what you just said really gets to me now. So we've seen snakes and we filmed snakes in cemeteries. And now I think it's because of the cement thing the concrete thing you're talking
Well, it's
about.
a place to
Because
hide under.
when we used to go walking in Tucson,
Mm.
whenever we saw a rattlesnake, they were always where the electrical boxes were that have the concrete around them. How interesting. It's about the heat thing of the
It's heat
concrete.
or cold. If it's in the
Yeah.
winter, they
Mm.
want to be by the electrical box because of the heat.
Right.
If it's in the summer, they want to go under the concrete for the
Right.
coolness.
For the
So
coolness.
watch when you walk.
Mm.
If you're by it, that's a rattlesnake
Yeah.
thing. But anyway, yeah, but
Mm.
I didn't know that about bodies. But yeah, there's I have a friend who is I'll have to get it from her. I think you were on the show with Margot Carrera. She talks about this openly all the time. Maybe on our Mother's Day show, maybe. I think you
Oh.
were. Remember, you were
Mhm.
both talking about Peru.
Yeah.
So she has pre-purchased her burial site, which is saving a tree, a redwood tree. So she's
Yeah.
going to be up in
I
the
like that.
redwoods.
That's so
Yeah.
cool.
And it's not ashes, not her body. It's going to be
In
her
Santa
ashes.
Cruz,
It's
'cause there
above
is a
north. I
forest
think it's northern.
north of Santa
It could
Cruz.
be. I could be wrong. I'll get her. I'll get her to tell us about
Yeah.
it.
Because there is a
Because it-
company that does that.
We'll have to get her on a show to talk about this because it's real and get the organization, but it's a way
Yeah.
of saving the trees. So
Mhm.
no developer can go in because it's a
Mhm.
burial ground.
Right.
But then we've seen that with the Dakota Access Pipeline, they didn't care about whose burial grounds they went on. So,
That's true.
but that, I don't know, maybe it's an indigenous
Oh, but
versus
that's because it was
non-indigenous.
indigenous.
And
But
it was
that's
oil.
coming, but that's now being reversed.
Yeah. So,
So,
I hope so.
yeah, that's now, that
There's
was one administration. Now the other administration is reversing what, yeah.
There's definitely a lack of reverence for our nature. There's a lack of
Mhm.
reverence for our Mother Earth. And I don't know if you saw the film 100 days of stillness, or when the earth stood still.
Mm.
And it was a documentary, and you'll love it. You guys will love it, about what happened to the earth during the pandemic.
oh, cool. I want to
And
see
just
that
what you
because
were talking about, how the
Mm.
earth healed,
Mhm.
the rivers got clear, the waters
Mm.
got clear. And here's the most fascinating, one of the
Mm.
most fascinating things is whales could hear
Mhm.
their babies.
Yeah.
Babies could hear their mothers But when cruise ships are going by,
Yeah.
it's so loud that they can't hear it.
Mm.
On these safaris, when all
Yeah.
these cars are going in safaris, as you know, living in Africa,
Mm.
then the cheetahs and the tigers, their babies can't hear when the mothers are calling them that she just killed something to come and eat. They
Yeah.
can't
No,
hear it.
the thing is, we do
They
have the
storm them,
technology to not have that kind of noise. We've had the technology for 20 years. We
Yeah.
have it.
Right.
It's
Okay.
just, it's not.
We've had solar
maybe-
for years.
Yeah,
Centuries.
absolutely. So centuries. So it's not made public, maybe, or maybe it costs a little bit more.
Yeah.
You know, and you think if I do it and I'm the only one, it's not going to work because nobody else is doing it. It's that kind of attitude.
Right.
But at the end of the day, we're the ones who are going to suffer for it.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
then the technology of keeping things quiet also has to do with pollution coming out. So like the
Mhm.
lack of muffler things or whatever. I'm not a car
Yeah,
person, but
it's
we
yeah,
can tell being in different states about their environmental laws by the noise of the cars.
absolutely like
And it's like,
Texas.
oh, look at me. Vroom, vroom,
Texas.
vroom. And you know, we don't
I'm
have,
just going to say, Texas, you need to
yeah.
do
Well,
something.
you know,
Come
there's
on.
certain places that they don't have that, and it's a kind of a macho thing to
It's
do.
an irreverency.
Yeah,
It's all about me. It's not about us.
Mm-mm.
right.
It's not about
And-
you and me and holding each other up and helping
Yeah.
our planet and helping our climate and helping each other grow and helping our trees blossom and helping our plants bloom.
Is it because of our lack of consciousness?
Can we
Okay,
just
sorry.
say that for people on motorcycles, especially men, the louder your motorcycle is, does not increase the size of your penis. Get over it.
Oh, here we go. Okay,
Well,
there
it's
we go.
true.
All
Yeah.
right.
It doesn't make you more manly.
Yeah.
Right.
It doesn't do
And I'm sorry,
anything
Nancy.
but
the-
hurt the environment.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah.
There's
Well,
that.
geez, get a
How
grip,
can we?
guys.
And it's not just motorcycles; it's
Seriously.
trucks. It's you know, we see this and we're like, oh,
Oh,
okay.
yeah.
So you must be
Jeez.
suffering from a level of something. So they're taking it out in a different way. So isn't that? I'm going right back to the consciousness because I think that is the crux of
Yeah.
why we're not conscious of the environment around us, and we're not conscious of that. Yeah.
Well, here's what it boils down to. And this is, I mean, I've hit on something that just recently, the people who've been attending these workshops that I've been doing, one fellow said, do you know that in my whole entire life, and I think he was in his early 60s, I never knew that I could change a belief. I just thought whatever I believed was true, and how do I deal with it?
Mm.
So it comes back. All of these things we're talking about is, what do we believe about all of that?
Mm.
What
Hmm.
beliefs are we holding and what beliefs are we carrying about all of that?
Mhm.
We believe that we're in charge, that nature means nothing, that I'm the one who can control nature, or I'm the one who can blow down, bulldoze forests without any conscious about it because of gain and because of this. What do I believe about it? What do we believe? And how we behave, cutting down a forest or whatever, is directly tied to what we believe about it.
Mhm.
So if we don't believe that we're here on this planet to help each other, to build each other up, to support each other, to contribute back to the world, then we're going to be self, and I don't care about anybody else.
Mm.
And that's the behavior is going to show that.
Mm.
And
It's
that's who we
self-destruction.
become, and it's self-destructive.
It's
It is.
toxic.
It's self-destruction.
Mhm.
And
Well,
not
you
only
think-
self-destructive, it's destructive to everything around us.
Exactly.
Yeah, because there's no reverence.
Right.
When I was in Peru and we did these all-night ayahuasca ceremonies in these power places that you cannot touch anymore at night. You cannot go, they're closed, forget it. We were so fortunate at that time to be able, when all the tourists went home, we would then be able to enact our all-night ancient ceremony that the shamans did 20,000 years ago.
Cool.
And so there's a reverence. When you walk on the land, there's a reverence to it. The Native American people know that.
Mhm.
They have a belief that that they revere the earth, they revere the sky, they revere the wind, they revere the trees because they're part of it.
Yeah.
When we believe we're not part of it and that it's only about me, then we're going to be destructive.
Yeah,
Right.
period. Because then it's,
We
yeah,
don't care. So
Mhm.
there's the behavior.
yeah, that's
Behavior's tied to the belief.
the cycle.
And then that's who we become. We
Mm.
become these egomaniacs who think it's all about us and we're so self-important that nobody else matters.
It's also about money. So now if you look at our money, so we have this
Which
so
is
weird.
trees
No,
give us
it's-
money.
Okay, so you cut up a bunch of trees and you make these thin bills that somehow have become valuable. You
Yeah.
can't eat the dollar bill.
Yeah.
You really, I mean, you could use them for toilet paper maybe, but they're really quite
Yeah,
useless.
they've been around.
You know, they're really quite useless,
Mm.
but we use them for all sorts of things. It's really the weirdest system. You know, where if you go into indigenous people cultures, they're not collecting dollar bills, they're collecting fruits and nuts and they're tending crops.
Well, they
And
also
they're-
shells
that-
became a trading currency too.
Exactly.
They've always created like cowrie
Yes.
shells were a
Mhm.
trading
But
currency.
those were used for decorations for girls getting married and for dances. And there was a purpose
Yeah.
for collecting the shells. They held some kind of value. So now we come along, we print money that holds a value in our minds. But if, let's just say something happened on Earth where fruits, vegetables, trees, fish, meat, streams, water, all gone, but you had a whole bunch of dollar bills. Good for you. What are you gonna do with them?
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, when Y2K was going to happen, I thought it was going to be exciting. I thought, man, we're going to be able to live on land and get rid of all these archaic ways of being. And I know it would be really hard and rough and everything, but can't we just be part of the land, So anyway, it's all good. It's all good. So
Okay.
ladies, thank you for joining us. Shelley, this has been fun talking about
Yeah,
trees.
always fun talking to you
And
guys.
that's your logo. So do tell me before you go,
Mm.
what is your favorite tree? Do you have a favorite?
Ooh, nice question.
Oh, that is a beautiful question. What is my favorite tree? Well, I have favorite trees for different reasons. I love the redwoods
Mm.
because they're so majestic.
Mm.
Mm.
They're just like, oh, and just so majestic. And I love the oak trees.
Oh,
They are also majestic, but different. Their
Mhm.
branches have such a
They're
personality.
wise.
they're perfect for swings.
They're wise.
And
But I think
climbing
they're
Mhm.
wise.
and wise.
Mm.
Great for climbing. I used to live up in Northern California in Lucas Valley near San Rafael. And we used to make tree houses. My dad had a parachute. And so we used to make a tree house out of the parachute and just climb the tree. I used to love climbing trees as a child.
That's me too. Me too. Yeah.
So evergreens are cool because they're like, okay, the rest of you trees lose your clothing, but I'm
Yeah.
keeping mine on.
Oh, yes.
right.
They're the
Keeping
Puritans.
my
They're
green.
like,
They're the
I'm keeping mine
Puritans.
on.
Everyone, again, you can keep up with Shelley. Go to ShelleyWhizin.com and also go get her book. What Do You Bring to the Table? Book.com is the website. And really, that's also about consciousness and cooking. And again, just keep up with Shelley. She's also on Facebook under Soul Diving Institute. And she's got all kinds of good programs. So keep up with her. And thanks again, everyone. Keep up with us at BigBlendRadio.com and tune in every fourth Tuesday for our Tree Talk show. So very
Love it.
cool.
Love it.
Thank you.
Thank you.